And I needed an oil change, and I tried to use a scooter to get from the shop back to home because I hadn't done the scooter thing in a long time.
How'd that go?
Battery died. I had to walk for like a half hour.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah. I mean, exercise wasn't. I was hoping to find a bike, so at least an e-bike, so I could get a little exercise in, but that didn't work out.
From ScienceSortOf.com, you're listening to Science Sort of.
Hello, welcome to Science Sort of. This is episode 343. I'm your host, Ryan. Joining me to talk about things that are science, things that are sort of science, and things that wish they were science around the theme of webs in the greenhouse. It's the return of one, Dr. Charlie Barnhart.
It's a pleasure to be back.
And my stalwart podcasting compatriot, Joe Batwinnis.
Greetings. This is, I think, my third episode in a row.
We didn't discuss if we were going to leave our videos on the entire time recording, and I feel we left them on, and I don't know how we're going to feel about that by the end of the show, but I just want everyone to know that we're looking at each other, and that's not usually... We've been doing the show since 2009.
Yeah.
And in 2009, you couldn't record a podcast with video. I think Skype had the ability to have a video call, but like it would kill your signal. The bandwidth just wasn't there.
Yeah, not if you're recording over the internet too. Yeah.
There'll be some nonverbal communication, which reminds me of a good joke. As a physicist, I'm allowed to say this. How can you tell if a physicist is extroverted?
I know the answer to this joke, so I won't say anything. I'll leave it to Joe.
I don't. How do you tell?
He looks at your shoes instead of his own or her own.
I was going to say, yeah. You can at least update the genders of that joke. It doesn't have to be
their own.
Yeah, they's own.
Well, speaking of sexist homophobes, let's talk about the James Webb Telescope. How's that for a transition?
Wow.
Is he truly?
Yeah, that was the whole controversy thing. So we're going to talk about that a little bit.
Okay.
Joe asked if we could talk about the James Webb Space Telescope, JWST, which launched on December 25th. And not without some controversy around the name of the telescope. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but there's some really cool science to talk about when it comes to this telescope, first and foremost. So, Joe, what got you excited to want to talk about this telescope?
Well, so the first thing is that it finally launched. The James Webb Space Telescope has been in the works since 1996.
Wow.
Yeah, and interestingly, I was rewatching The West Wing a few years ago, which aired in like the
Sam
early
talks
2000s.
about it, right?
You're not Sam. Is it Sam?
Rob Lowe's character?
No, it's what's his name? It shows how much I remember this show. Nope, the other one.
Josh.
Yep, Josh Lyman.
Oh,
yep.
is that the episode where he goes like stargazing with the astronomer and they have like all the flirting?
I don't remember what episode it actually is. All I remember is that he's walking around, he's talking about the James Webb Space Telescope and how it's, like years behind schedule and billions over budget. And it's like, oh, Josh, oh, you sweet summer child. It's 2021. It just launched. 20 years after that episode talking about how late it is, it finally launched. So that's cool.
Do you know why it was so delayed?
It's really hard.
So I have to imagine, I don't work in this space, but I have to I have to imagine that building a device that is extremely sensitive, but also compact enough to launch, but also can fit inside a rocket and unfurl itself in orbit once it needs to that sounds like a pretty complex piece of machinery.
Yeah, exactly. So it's the follow-on to the Hubble Space Telescope, right? And so Hubble Space Telescope sits in Earth orbit.
Correct.
And, it can see back pretty far. But they took a picture once with the Hubble, I think it's called the Deep Field picture, where they basically pointed the Hubble at an empty portion of sky and said, let's just take a long exposure picture and see what it finds. And lo and behold, all this stuff showed up. And they were like, oh, wow, that's dope. And so they had this... They wanted to build a new telescope.
After we put the contacts on the Hubble because it needed contacts.
Yeah, this is after we fixed it. And they said, that's cool. What if we had a telescope that could look back even further and get a better shot of that stuff that's really far away, or rather really old, right? Because it's all traveling at the speed of light.
Distance is the equivalent of time at these scales.
Right.
That's why it's a light year.
Yeah, exactly. And so the Webb was designed specifically to look back even further in time than Hubble could.
Right.
And in order to do that, one, it is a infrared telescope.
Yep.
Instead of just a visible, or instead of mostly visible like Hubble. I think Hubble can do some infrared, but James Webb is basically all infrared.
Right.
And then it's really big.
And there's a third thing, which is where they parked it. So I want to talk a little. I want to talk a little bit about all that. So to kind of do it in the order that you brought it up, infrared telescope is able to see fainter objects than a visible light telescope. And I don't understand exactly all the physics behind that, but just to explain the basic of, in terms of like wavelengths and stuff, we see light in the visible light spectrum, which is why we named it that. There's no special, there's nothing magical about the visible light spectrum other than that's the spectrum our eyes evolved to see, because it's a lot of what the sun throws off and gets through our atmosphere. So that's the Roy G. Biv rainbow thing that everybody's familiar, hopefully everyone's familiar with. And red at the lower end of that spectrum has a longer wavelength than violet at the higher end of that spectrum. So when you go above violet, you get X-rays, gamma rays, ionizing radiation, things that are radioactive. That's where it gets a little dangerous. When you go below red, so infrared literally means below red, the wavelengths are longer, and they're long enough that we can't see them. We don't have the optical receptors for them. But that means that those waves can travel further without hitting into, or I guess they do hit in more stuff. So they're
running out of energy, right? A lower energy, the wavelength gets longer.
And that's also where microwaves are. And when you have a longer wavelength, I think it's a little less energetic, and it's more likely to bump into stuff on its path through the universe. So the reason microwaves work is because the wavelength of light that is microwaves, it's highly likely to hit like water molecules in your food and impart its energy into those water molecules, where on the other end of the spectrum, something like X-rays, which have a very short wavelength, are able to basically dance between the raindrops of our atoms, and they're only likely to hit something if it's very dense, like your bone. They're not as likely to hit something that's not as dense, like skin. So that's why we can use X-rays to see through our skin and see our bones. But it's also why lead, which is incredibly dense, is a good shield against high energy, high wavelength radiation. Is that all making sense, Charlie?
Yeah, you basically got it. It also has to do with the electron cloud around the atom, but generally denser things have more electrons and can interact with more photons at a quantum level. The microwave cooks your food because the microwave photon resonates with the electron cloud of a water molecule. Okay. And causes it to vibrate, and the vibration creates friction and then creates heat. And that's why frozen food doesn't cook well, because it's not able to vibrate, and you get that icicle in the middle. So all different wavelengths of light interact with some matter and don't interact, that is to say, pass through other types of matter. And infrared in particular can travel through dust quite well. And so this allows us to see through some of the dust in space, the gaseous.
Because space is actually kind of dust, as empty as it is kind of dusty, if I understand correctly.
Yeah, with atomic bits of gas, and we're
especially
able to
over the
see
scales we're talking about.
The inverse of that would be your window. Your window allows visible light to pass through. The silicon oxide of the glass of your window allows visible light to pass through, but it traps infrared light. And so if you looked at out your window with some night vision goggles, it would just be opaque.
Interesting. So so you're saying that the infrared light travels through the dust that's just kind of existing in the galaxy or the universe better than other kinds of light. So is that the main reason?
When we say dust, we're saying hydrogen.
Okay.
We're saying just little clouds of gas. Yeah.
So how does that allow James Webb to see functionally further back in time, I guess is my question.
Picture like haze on the horizon, and picture you're somewhere beautiful, like where I live now, Bellingham, and you're looking at the San Juan Islands, or in Thailand looking at various islands. Or in West Virginia, where you're born and raised, Ryan, you can see mountain range after mountain range, and they get grayer and bluer and bluer and bluer, and then you can't see any further. And that's because there's haze in the atmosphere that that blocks that view. The James Webb, using an infrared, I don't know what you'd call it, charge couple device,
receiver, imager,
receiver. Yeah,
it's not because it's not a camera.
Yeah.
It's not like it's not a lens in the traditional sense, but it is sort of a receptor,
a receiver.
Yeah.
They call
Sensor.
them cameras.
Sensor.
Sensor.
It
camera.
allows you to collect photons that are able to pass through that haze, to pass through that hydrogen gas that's scattered throughout space. So if we looked at it in the visible, we couldn't see it. It's like putting on polarized glasses, and so now we can see into the water and see where the fish are and see where the rocks are.
But you're saying if the James Webb Telescope looked at the Smoky Mountains, it wouldn't get it. It wouldn't understand why we called them smoky, because they wouldn't look hazy.
Yeah, I'd venture to say that. I don't know what the haze is comprised of, but if
I think
it's
it's
comprised
usually fog
of,
and atmospheric. It's not like
if it's
actual
hydrogen,
smoke.
it could see through it. If it's water, then it would not. But I think we're getting a little lost with that analogy. I think we've used it to the complete utility that we could.
Okay, cool. So that's how James Webb is able to see further from a sensor, from a
It's
mechanical...
an X-ray for hydrogen dust.
Oh, there you go. I like that. What was the second way you said that it's able to see further, Joe?
It's also really big. The mirror diameter is way bigger than Hubble's.
Okay.
So the mirror diameter on Webb is 21 feet, I think. So it's really big.
And is this one of these like compound mirrors that like they can move the plates around like an insect eye?
Yeah, well, so that comes from necessity, right? So ideally, you have one big mirror, or like Hubble does.
With a contact lens.
Well, yeah, with a contact lens. Ideally, you'd have one mirror uncorrected. So yeah, Hubble had a 8-foot diameter mirror compared to James Webb's 21-foot diameter mirror. And because it's so big, where Hubble could fit in the back of a space shuttle, the Webb had to fit into an Ariane 5 rocket.
Is that how you pronounce that?
Yeah, Ariane 5.
I thought it might have been Ariane. I didn't know.
Oh.
I just.
I mean, you could be right. I've always said Ariane.
Okay.
But anyway, it had to fit. It had to fit in the fairing of an Ariane 5 rocket, and a 21-foot mirror is not going to fit. So by necessity, they had to figure out a way to basically build the mirror in space. So the whole thing folds up, and so it's made of all those hexagonal panels that basically deployed once the satellite was, or the telescope was in space.
It's a transformer, is what you're saying.
It's a transformer, and it's more than just that too. The whole thing had to unfold more than just the mirror. There's also the shield, which we'll get to.
Yeah, so they're constructing a lens out of polygons, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, but that is like an insect eye, right? That is how insect eyes work. If you look at a close-up of an eye of a fly or a dragonfly or any insect, it's tiny little hexagonal prisms that they use as their compound lens. So this is something that nature figured out millions of years ago, and we've just had to recreate in an engineering sense by necessity.
Yeah, so it's currently on its way to it's at its final location. It's currently in a many-month period of adjusting all those mirrors.
And we'll talk about its final location here in a second. Charlie, did you have something you want to add?
Yeah, I just want to say all cameras work as a bucket that collects photons,
including our eyes.
Yeah, including our eyes. And so when it's darker, your pupils get bigger so they can collect more photons. And that's how so if you see cameras at the Olympics right now, or someone that's a photographer, they're all about fat glass. What does that mean? It means you want a big lens that is a bigger bucket to collect more photons. And that way you can resolve an image in a shorter amount of time. If you don't have a lot of time, then that will add blur or it'll add noise. And then a computer could be used to increase the gain, increase the amount of energy that each photon imparts onto the camera so that it can increase its sensitivity. But that creates that film grain, that little noise that you see. And so if you want to resolve as much light as possible, it's simple physics. You just have to make the bucket as big as possible. Same as catching rainfall. If you want to get as much water as possible, you have to make the cistern as large as possible.
And we think from the fossil record that the earliest eyes in critters like trilobites was literally just a small pit on the surface of their exoskeleton with some light-sensitive cells at the bottom of the pit. And that alone was enough to give them a competitive advantage in the early oceans when things were swimming above them. And, this was also like the dawn of predation. So it was the first time in Earth history where you had to worry about being eaten by something else. And so having even a little bit of light sensing ability where you could just tell if something was above you was a huge survival advantage. There's a lot of talk often of like, how could an organ as complex as an eye, that if any one component of it isn't working properly, the whole thing fails? Is that blind watchmaker thing. How could that evolve naturally? How could that not be designed by an intelligent designer? And it's because, even a small bucket, when nobody, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. So in the land of the blind trilobites, even the small photon bucket is king.
And on that note, some animals do have infrared sensors. We do very slightly. Our skin, you can sense if someone is nearby or you're nearby something warm.
Kinesthetic sense.
Especially like with the inside of your wrist, you can definitely tell if something's warm. That's how you make sure
your baby's milk.
The bath water.
Yeah.
Baby's milk or the bath water won't burn the baby.
Yep. One other quick thing before we talk about the placement of this telescope, Charlie, is this telescope is also apparently going to be able to look at the atmosphere of exoplanets. Can you talk about that at all?
No. I mean, I can speculate. I can put on my professor hat and talk a bunch of garbage. I'm guessing that it's able to view various wavelengths of light, and with different wavelengths of light, you can see what is being absorbed and what is being reflected. In each molecule, an atom will have its own absorptive and reflected signature, and you can deconvolve that and deduce what things are made out of.
Yeah, it's got a handful of spectrographs on it.
And we've talked on the show before about how, like, if we find alien life, if they're anything like us, we might actually find them by finding a planet that has a lot of pollution in its atmosphere, which is depressing, I guess. I don't know. Like, I'm excited.
That's a cool. Yeah, that's an old school thought. Like, try to look for sodium or mercury to see if they have streetlights, because all aliens will evolve the exact same stupid technology we have.
Well, I mean, we talked about that in a previous episode of the show where
radio waves make sense.
the zoologist guide to the galaxy, where, like, there are, if you want to end up with life that's anything like us, it is probably going to end up being the sort of life form that can move, can manipulate objects, can communicate, can pass along information, can develop technology, right? Those are all consistent things that you might expect to find in an intelligent.
I'll be so depressed if we find out aliens have terribly inefficient sodium streetlights that blind out the night sky. Just like we do.
That's probably what did it for Krypton. That's probably what caused the planet to explode. I say wearing a Superman hoodie while we record. Okay, the third thing I want to talk about with James Webb is placement. I think I spent as much time reading about Lagrange points as I did reading about the actual James Webb Telescope. So excited to get into this. Who wants to kick us off?
So it's at a Lagrange point.
Which one, Joe? There are
is that like the ZZ Top song?
Yeah, it's exactly like that.
Okay.
So it's at L2.
Joke.
L2.
And so what that means is that, so the reason they put it at L2 is to hide it from
don't you're jumping way ahead. We got to talk about Lagrange points
all right.
in general first.
Fair enough.
So Lagrange points, when you have two massive bodies one orbiting the other. So we are orbiting the sun. There are
or more. It gets trickier though.
Sure, three-body problem. And this is a partial solution to the general three-body problem, but I don't have without Ben, I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole because Ben's off in a rabbit hole somewhere.
He likes bunnies.
Man loves rabbits. And all lagomorphs, if we're being honest, but bunnies are dominant in that space. So two bodies, one orbiting the other, form 5 points in their orbits where the gravity between the two of them is the tug of war of gravity is roughly equivalent. So you can park things in these points and you can keep them in those points without much energy, and they will continue in an orbit that is at that point without a lot of extra effort needed.
Right.
So if you
Webb
think about,
will need to do adjustments every couple of weeks. It'll do a little rocket burst.
So there's if you think of the sun as the center of a ring and the Earth orbiting is the ring, there's 5 points. Lagrange 1 is in between Earth and the sun. So that's the most obvious tug of war, where you've got these two large gravitational bodies pulling you, and there's a point where that kind of neutralizes, right?
And obviously it'll be a lot closer to the Earth because the sun's fatter, so it pulls harder.
Yeah.
And so to make that equal point, you have to
Squid Game it. Yeah. And then there's L2, which is behind the Earth. I'm a little less clear on how that one balances out. It's the point at which, it's where there's a point behind the Earth, where outside of the orbit of Earth, away from the sun, where you can park an object, and it'll basically orbit in the same orbit as Earth, but just a slightly larger circumference.
So that one's go ahead, Joe.
It's basically you draw a line straight from the center of the sun through the Earth and then out further, and then there's a point back there where that's L2, and that's where Webb is.
Yes.
Is sitting, and it's kind of orbiting in a little circle back there that I think has something to do with the moon somehow.
And it'll be further away from the Earth than the L1. Just remember, folks, that the gravitational force goes as the gravitational constant times big mass times little mass divided by the radius squared.
That's true, and that's why it's an inverse square law. And then there's L3, which is on the opposite side of Earth's orbit from the sun. So if you've ever read any comics or sci-fi where it's there's a planet that we can't see because it's always on the opposite side of the sun from our orbit, that's L3. That's that point. We've never parked anything there because I don't know that we'd be able to communicate with it without some pretty advanced.
You'd need other satellites to.
Yeah. So we haven't figured out a scientific use for L3 yet, but it's kind of an interesting point in space. And then L4...
You all just don't know. There's so many conspiracy theories about that. We're saving that for the sort of...
That's where the hollow Earth is. It's at L3. Yeah. It's not here. This Earth is solid. We got a hollow Earth at L3. And then L4 and L5 are sort of kind of perpendicular to Earth's orbit based on equilateral triangles. And L4 is ahead of our orbit and L5 is behind our orbit. And there are good uses for those points as well. And then the only other thing I think that's important to cover with the different Lagrange points is that L1, 2, and 3 are considered unstable Lagrange points, and L4 and 5 are considered stable Lagrange points. And I haven't found a great explanation for why that is. That's because I think a lot of it gets explained. They get explained
picture it as a hilltop, right?
Yeah, exactly.
An unstable one is the top of a hill, so you can carefully put a ball there, and hopefully it'll stay there. Whereas if you're at a bowl, then you can put a ball there.
Or L1, 2, and 3 are saddles, right? So they've got
they're saddles. Yeah, exactly.
So if you put a ball on two sides, if you divide it up into quadrants like the cardinal directions, if you put a ball to the north or the south of L1, it might roll into L1. But if you put it to east or west of L1, it's going to roll away from L1.
Yeah, and so the what are the stable ones? 4 and 5?
Yeah.
Around Jupiter, that's where you find all the Trojan asteroids.
Yeah, that was really cool.
So it's this big bowl in space that collects rocks.
And they're called the Trojan asteroids because...
I don't know. The Greeks or something?
Because I believe the first 3 ones that we found, we named Agamemnon, Achilles, and Hector, all warriors in the Trojan War.
Yeah, and they every once in a while get out of line and throw one our way.
So that's so that's why they are the Trojan. That's why anything parked in an L4 or L5 spot is called a Trojan. That's the general name for an object in that space, regardless of whether they've been named after heroes of old. So I learned a lot in reading up for this story about Lagrange points, and I feel like I have a much better understanding of them. I think I used to think of them in sort of simplistic tug-of-war notions, but now, because of what I've read and because of Charlie's explanation, I think of them more as topographic maps where you can park things.
That's exactly how you should think of them.
Yeah, where it's just a stable point on the gravitational map of the solar system, which is just so cool.
We've looked at them quite a bit for placing weapon systems for humans.
Well, let's not do that. And these were actually, we've known about these for a while. So it was a mathematical problem called the general three-body problem that was considered by a mathematician, Italian-French mathematician, Joseph-Louis Lagrange, from his essay sur le problème des trois corps, the essay on the problems of three bodies in 1772.
Scottish?
Wow. Italian-French.
Oh, I was confused. It's just a stupid joke. Never mind. Continue on with the science.
Actually, I think we need to move away from the science for a moment and talk about the controversy, to say it like the Brits say it, sort of.
Oh, yeah.
So this telescope is named James Webb because James Webb was the administrator of NASA during the space race, appointed by Kennedy, I think. And there was some hubbub surrounding the fact that this was during a period in time called the Lavender Scare, when a lot of LGBTQ people were discriminated, problem solved, were discriminated against even worse than today, including being like fired from their job. So like if you remember the Mad Men episode where Don Draper sees the art director with the dude and then fires him, like it's that sort of stuff. Like it's, you find out somebody who's gay and you fire him. Not cool, obviously completely discriminatory, and something that never should have happened and shouldn't continue to be a problem. But there's kind of two factors to people's problem with this being the James Webb Space Telescope. One is that James Webb was not a scientist. He was more of a politician. He was more of a Washington insider that kind of got appointed because he knew the right people and could get stuff done in Washington, which is a skill and probably a useful skill for a NASA administrator to have. But I think NASA as an organization, it's obviously one of our premier scientific agencies. So having somebody who knows the science is probably helpful to that. And two, it's, probable that it's claimed that James Webb was directly involved with firing people from NASA for being gay during the 60s. So there was a petition that was signed by over 1,200 people, astronomers and astronomy enthusiasts, who wanted NASA to change the name. I guess usually the way a telescope gets named is by committee. There's a lot of discussions that happen, but this was sort of just, James Webb was just sort of decided, and there wasn't a lot of transparency in the process. And then when people asked for clarity and clarification on why that name was chosen and whether that name would be reconsidered, there wasn't a lot of clarity on the back end of that either. So people are frustrated by this name, and I think their frustrations are valid, but I also think, I don't know if there's a way you can change the name of a telescope once it's already launched. That kind of, it literally feels like the horse is out of the barn on that one. So I just kind of wanted to acknowledge that because I think it's worth making sure that that's on record too when it comes to discussions of the satellite and the legacy of James Webb and some of NASA's problematic history.
Yeah, I just think we should avoid naming things after people. We're all flawed. We're all beautiful, but we're also subject to heirs of our own ways or of our time, and let's just keep it in the realm of myth and nature. And I mean, I'm fine with Trojans, like that's okay, but it's, I mean, yeah, like to whether or not there was a person that was named Achilles who fought in the Trojan War, like that's I mean, probably way cooler with gay people than James Webb, but also not like somebody that we have a historical record of that can be because they're ideologic constructs, and so you can view them as such and adjust your own perspective to them, whereas people are people, and
deifying anyone just, it doesn't work because they'll always let you down.
It's greedy, it's selfish, it's egotistical. I mean, I live in a region of the planet where everything is named after English sailors, and it makes no sense at all. I much prefer the original names that had something to do with the sound or the view or the look of it. I much prefer something like you're driving around the rural American countryside, you go over a bridge and it's called like Dead Dog Bridge instead of like Bill's Bridge, and it's much more interesting. Like what happened there? Right. I want to know the story. In
Canaan Valley in West Virginia, there's a housing development that's kind of fledgling but sort of stalled out, I think partly because of pandemic stuff, called Tuscan Ridge, and all the street names are like Italian names, and I'm like, this is insane. Like I'm not in the Canaan Valley of West Virginia pretending that I'm in Tuscany, and then I drive past another named neighborhood that's like Beaver Creek Ridge, and I'm like, hell yeah, like that's what I want. I want beavers and otters and hellbenders and keep it. Yeah, I'm totally with you, Charlie. Like the weird little local microcosms and stories. I think it's exactly what you said. It's stories of the land and the people that make things interesting. And putting any single person up on a pedestal I think is only a recipe for disappointment, because
just call it something cool and poetic and sci-fi, like Time Seer or Deep Time Mystic or whatever. I don't know. Make it more fantastical.
Or if you don't want to go back to like classical mythology, like use modern mythology. Call it the Enterprise. I don't care. Like call it the Millennium
Falcon.
Falcon.
I'm totally fine with that too.
And make sure you mispronounce Falcon every single time, which is I every time I see a bird that is a falcon, I say it right in my head. But anytime I think about the ship, I automatically switch over to the wrong pronunciation. So,
well,
but NASA's in a particularly tough spot in this particular arena, to say the word particular 1,000 times, because
particularly
of all the scientific federal agencies that exist in the federal government. Y'all might not know this. I learned this in my year of doing science policy. NASA's the only one that has a expressed mandate to have a public-facing outreach component. So, like, that's one of the reasons they get the attention, is because they're asking for it. Like, DOE, Department of Energy, does a ton of cool stuff. We don't tend to hear about it because it's not their job necessarily to tell us. Like, there's talk about making some of these other scientific agencies that do really cool work a little bit more publicly accessible, a little bit more promotional of the interesting stuff they're doing. But NASA's the only one where it's like, it's in the mandate. You gotta involve the public in what you're doing. And so I think that's part of why people feel like the contract was broken a little bit in this instance, where they named this telescope without sufficient feedback and didn't respond to the feedback that they got after they announced it. So it does seem like a little bit of a misstep, I have to say.
Yeah, it's all a waste of time. We had to talk about it, and I don't think we should waste any more time on it. And I think NASA wasted a tremendous amount of time by sticking by a name that has nothing to do with the
mission. Yeah.
Yep.
We could have called it Lagrange Point 2 Space Telescope.
There you go.
We didn't actually talk about why it's there.
But then we're naming it after another white dude. But
oh, you mean, okay. I see.
Oh, yeah, fair enough.
I see. That's true. I see what Joe is saying. We probably should clarify that one of the benefits of being in Lagrange Point 2 is that the Earth is constantly blocking the sun.
Well, it's not exactly that. It's the reason it's at Lagrange Point 2 and the reason it has a gigantic sunshade is that by being at Lagrange Point 2, on the opposite side of the Earth from the sun, yes, the Earth helps block the sun.
Eclipses
but it also is just always pointing away from the sun.
Yeah.
The instrument itself is always pointed away from the sun and away from Earth. And then the sun shield behind it helps block out all of the heat and light from the sun. All the infrared energy coming from the sun and all the infrared energy coming from Earth is blocked.
Right.
Oh yeah, because the Earth's atmosphere would be a lens. As the Earth shines through the sun shines through the extent of the Earth's atmosphere, it could focus it. I mean, it would make a giant frickin' rainbow on the thing.
Yeah, so by pointing it into the Lagrange point, you can point it always away from Earth and away from the sun into the void. Unlike Hubble, which is orbiting Earth and is in and out of daylight every 90 minutes.
Right.
I think that's some poetic justice that there's a giant rainbow on the James Webb Telescope.
And infrared light also, like, it tends to be warming, so that's why, at restaurants they have those red heat lamps. Like, that's why those lamps are red and not any other color, because that tends to produce the spectrum of light that is going to keep things warm. The instrumentation on James Webb, because it's trying to detect infrared light coming from other places, it's really important that it stays shielded. It also needs power. And we still aren't super cool with launching radioactive materials into any orbit, including Lagrange points. So it has solar panels that unfolded that are the size of tennis courts, which sounds awesome. And then
that's so rad.
The sun shield is the size of a tennis court.
Oh, the sun shield is the size of a tennis court.
Yeah, but still, like, it's this massive sun shield. It's a multi-layer set of films that unrolled once it was on orbit.
And then the other thing is the instrumentation has to be kept very, very cold. So it operates at about 50 Kelvin. Yep. So that is, the Kelvin scale is the same. Each degree Kelvin or unit of Kelvin, I don't think Kelvin uses degrees technically. Each unit of Kelvin temperature, thermal energy or whatever is the same as a unit of Celsius temperature. So that means that it's operating at 50 degrees Celsius above absolute zero, which is insane.
Yep. On the sensor side.
Yeah.
But on the far side,
negative 220 Celsius.
Yeah. But on the spacecraft bus side, where all the solar panels are, and all the equipment to like fly the spacecraft, On that side, it's more like 300 Kelvin or like 80 degrees Fahrenheit.
So cool.
And so that's why the sun shield is there to manage that temperature delta. And that's why it has this instrument called a cryocooler, or a piece of equipment called a cryocooler, to help cool things down and not transmit all of that heat from one side of the spacecraft to the other where the sensors are.
Right.
Because think about it. It's trying to see in the infrared, so it doesn't want a bunch of infrared garbage going into the sensor.
Right, including from itself, right? The spacecraft bus is going to be warm, so you want to keep that away from the sensor.
Don't
so
piss
it
into
could
the
ruin
wind,
its own image.
James Webb.
Exactly.
And the other thing about operating in a vacuum, which I learned from reading the Martian Sierra episode with Andy Ware, is you can't, like, things don't cool down as quickly in space because there's no atmosphere to conduct the heat. So your only option, you can't use conduction, you can't use convection, you're left with only radiative cooling, which is much slower in a vacuum. Even if the vacuum is very, very cold, that doesn't matter if there's no matter. It doesn't help if there's no matter, like actual physical mass, to transfer the heat to. So
you had me. It doesn't matter.
Rejecting heat on spacecraft is incredibly difficult.
Every time I say it doesn't matter, I can only think about Liam Neeson in The Grey talking about the wolves. It doesn't matter. They've got our scent. We're already dead. It doesn't matter.
And in that case, it literally did matter.
That was a good movie. I don't know what you're talking about.
No, I love that movie. I'm just saying the scent is made out of matter.
That's true. Scent is made out of matter. So, yeah. Smells eventually do settle onto the ground. That is a thing. Speaking of smells and aromas and bouquets, this is a stretch, but we're going to try it.
No, that's great.
Send it.
Let's talk about the bouquet of our beverages in our next segment, which is what are we drinking? An episode of Science Sort of if we didn't also talk about what we are drinking. Who should go first? It's much later for me. Should I go first or should I go last?
You always should go last because you like to pontificate about your beverage.
Nah, we've tightened up the drink segment quite a bit since the early days. Let's who's closest
I'll go
to
first.
Who's closest to a Lagrange point? I think probably Joe
Statistically
is.
speaking, we're all exactly the same distance.
Yeah, I'm way too far north. Yeah. I'm furthest away.
Joe,
Yeah,
you're
it's winter,
closest.
so I'm
I've decided
closer.
randomly that you're closest to a Lagrange point, so you go first.
Okay, cool. I'm probably the closest to the equator, so I guess that works out.
And I think you're the highest elevation of the three of us at the moment.
Oh, yeah, almost certainly. I am drinking some hot tea, some green tea, some Bigelow green tea with lemon and honey because I've had a cough. I apologize if any of the coughs made it through to the final recording. So that's what I was drinking. It was tasty.
Nice. He's COVID free, just in case anybody's worried about getting it over the sound waves.
Over the internet. But here's my COVID test. I'm holding it up to the camera that nobody else can see.
I mean, we're not in the same room with you, so who cares?
Exactly.
And that's the joke.
Charlie, I think we're both pretty coastal, so I'm not sure, but I'm further south than you. So does that mean I'm next?
Yep.
Okay. Oh, but before we get off the green tea kick, Joe, there's a tea company. I can't remember the name of it for the life of me at the moment. They make a green tea blend it's green tea blended with toasted rice, and it's so good.
Oh.
I've had that before.
Yeah.
I think
it's a legitimate Japanese thing, but I just managed to find this tea. I was looking for this very specific Japanese tea that my advisor got me when he was on a trip to Japan. That's a black soybean tea that Julie really likes, and I literally could only find. I went to the Japanese market here in DC and I asked about it, and they were like, "That's super specific, even for Japan. Like that's a regional thing that we're just not from there, so we don't do it." So I finally found a tea place that would do it in the States. It's like in New York, but to get free shipping, I had to order a bunch of other stuff. So I ordered this toasted brown rice green tea that was it's so good.
So before we jump off me, apropos of our last subject, are you guys familiar with the Sophia Space Telescope?
What are you doing? What's happening?
I know. Sophia Space Telescope. It's a space telescope that was built into the back of a 747. I just muted my microphone because a loud airplane flew over my house, and what I realized was that it was the Sophia Space Telescope flying over my house. It just took off.
I knew he wouldn't interrupt without a legitimate reason.
There was a reason.
I'm furious.
Space telescopes all night. Anyway, that's it. On to you.
Senbird Tea in New York is the tea place that I got this delightful tea from, Joe.
Gotcha. Senbird.
Yes, Senbird. Not an ad, but oh man, I got some really good tea. I also got the Japanese market. They didn't have the Kuromamecha, which is the soybean tea, but they did have this toasted barley tea that's also really, really good. I'm into just like toast something and then brew with it. Like I was at the Japanese Latino market the other day, and they had like toasted corn tea, which is toasted corn. You make tea with it. Sounded great. Didn't get any huge bag. Don't have that much space in the cabinet. But as to what I'm having, which I'll try not to wax poetic about. Jeez, guys, making a guy feel a feel. I have been getting back into the Belgian scene. I don't know why I was sleeping on Belgian beers for a minute, but for whatever reason, I just, when I go to the store and I was looking around at the offerings, I still love an IPA, but, Julie and I like to share a beer in the evenings while we're cooking dinner together and, after a kid gets home from daycare. And she's still not super into IPA, so I've been trying to find stuff that we can share a single bottle of that's good for both of us. And the Belgian beers have been a hit. So this is a Herkenrode Vesper. It's a Belgian triple. And I guess it's from 1182, not this particular bottle, but I guess the facility which it comes from. And yeah, it's exactly what you want. It is a straight pitch Belgian triple right down the middle, being drank out of a old school classic Science Sort of What Are We Drinking frosted beer mug.
Very nice.
So that's what I'm having. It's delightful. I love it. Everyone should drink Belgian beer. They know how to make beer in that country.
Yeah, I would love to try one on tap or in a can. Because the bottle skunk, I love the beer, but how do you get past that bottle skunk? There's
a bar in Leesburg, Virginia that Abe took me to because he was really excited to check it out with his buddy JP, and I was allowed to tag along, which I appreciated. And it's the first bar in the States that was allowed to have delirium tremens on tap or on draft. So it's a bar that all they have are all the different styles of delirium tremens, but they're all on draft.
Awesome.
Yeah, it was really cool. What are you having, Sir Charles?
I'm drinking two beverages. I'll talk about the one that's federally legal first. I'm just drinking a Thurston Wolf, Dr. Wolf's Family Red. It's a sessionable wine, so about 11%. That's mainly Zinfandel and Petit Syrah from Horseheaven Hills.
Thurston Wolf kind of sounds like a heavy metal band.
River
Thurston
Valley.
Wolf.
It does. It is full body. It is a little heavy. Despite the low ABV, but it's very tasty. And then complementing that, I'm working on a Rogue brewery down in Oregon, CBD apple cider vinegar seltzer, infused with lavender, mint, and lemon zest. It's got 30 milligrams of CBD, which is nice. It's not psychoactive at all, but it does lower your anxiety, which can be useful, and is anti-inflammatory. And it's only 15 calories. And so what more can you ask for?
So how are your inflammations?
Legality.
Are they uninflamed?
I'm feeling minimal inflammation right now.
You know a cool thing about tea, Joe? We were talking about the Maillard reaction before. A cool thing about tea, the Maillard reaction is a non-enzymatic browning reaction that occurs with the application of heat and a complex interaction of sugars and carbohydrates in the absence of moisture. So that's why if your food is wet, you can't get it to brown very well if it's cooking in the pan. Tea is one of the few foods out there in the world, in the game, most popular beverage in the world, I believe, even more so than coffee, that we actually let enzymatically brown as part of the production. So the reason it goes from green tea to black tea is because we allow it to go through enzymatic browning. The same thing that like if you leave your basil in the fridge for too long, it's all black and gross.
Whoa.
That's what we do to tea on purpose to create black tea.
I'd never heard that.
How about that?
It's pretty neat.
How do you keep the mold off of it?
I don't know. I'm not a tea expert. I know that one fact.
Low humidity, I guess.
Yeah, I guess so. So yeah, I think it's white tea. I want to say it's like white tea when it's harvested, and then it goes to green tea, and then it goes to black tea.
Now that I think about it, that's what we do with tobacco leaves.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And other flowers.
So
more than just it's not just like the drying process for tobacco. There's more going on there.
No, you dry.
Well, it goes from green to brown.
Yeah, it goes from green to brown, and you like hang it in like a shed or a barn. So yeah,
I just figured that was like I just imagine that as like the leaf dying after you take it off the plant, right? Like just like the leaves when they fall off the tree.
It is, but
it's
what
the same
is
thing,
that?
I guess.
It is, but like
I guess that's what's happening. Yeah,
but like we don't let romaine lettuce do that. You know, we try to keep it from doing that on its way from the field to your Caesar salad. God, Caesar salad.
But we do make kale chips, which are so good. But I guess that's the whatever Maillard.
That's Maillard because you're cooking them up. So anyway, I thought that's a cool thing I know about tea that I learned relatively recently.
That is interesting.
Great YouTube series called "What's Eating Dan's" from America's Test Kitchen.
Oh, we do it with porcinis and all sorts of like very, very flavorful mushrooms.
Mushrooms are tricky though.
No, this is blowing my mind. I'm trying to think of all the different things.
Mushrooms are tricky because
parasitic load callback.
Because mushrooms have chitinous cell walls, which neither animal nor vegetables have. So they have very interesting properties when it comes to moisture retention, and that's one of the reasons you like can't really. You can burn a mushroom, but you can't overcook a mushroom. How about that? What's Eating Dan on YouTube? I've tried to find contact information to get him on the show because I think he's amazing. And so if anyone knows Dan from America's Test Kitchen in the What's Eating Dan YouTube series, please reach out and let me know so we can try to get him on the show because I would love that. You know who else I love? Patrick Wilson, John Bradley, Halle Berry, Roland Emmerich. Love all those people. And they got together and they put together a movie for our entertainment and yours. And we're going to talk about the trailer for that movie in our next segment, the surprisingly frequent and soon return of Trailer Trash Talk. Cue the banjos!
Hey, y'all. It's time for Trailer Trash Talk.
It's Trailer Trash Talk.
Trailer Trash Talk is the segment of the show that we used to do every single episode. I don't know that people complained, but it definitely derailed the show, and we're going to let it derail the show this time because a film, I think I'm generous calling it a film, I think it's already...
Kino.
I think it's already out in theaters. What does Kino mean?
Kino? I don't know. It's German for like perfect cinema. I don't know.
Okay. There's a YouTube channel that puts out trailers. It's called like Kino Check or something like that. I never knew what it meant. Yeah. Thank you.
But yes, it is out. It is out already. It came out the 4th.
It's been getting absolutely terrible reviews, left, right, and center. But the trailer is a masterpiece. And we are, of course, talking about Roland Emmerich's 2022 film Moonfall. So, you both watched the trailer?
Yes.
What'd you think?
Yeah, I watched it yesterday. Kind of forgot it, but I'll let you guys talk.
It's very silly. I mean, I was concerned because like the trailers I had seen up until I watched this one. It was I don't know. I thought it was going to be more serious.
No.
And then this trailer starts by a guy saying free bagels.
This trailer is don't look up if everyone involved knew that they were making just a dumb movie.
Yeah, it's pure camp. I was hoping it was more serious too, Joe. I thought it'd be like there was a asteroid that passed between the moon and the Earth and destabilized the orbit. Mm-hmm. But
no, it's aliens.
Apparently, like Donnie Darko, like simplistic CGI water waves are coming out of the moon.
Yeah,
That's what I got from it.
That or like Terminator 2.
Not Terminator 2. Terminator 2 was all like liquid and cool. This is like
that.
It's more nanites.
Well, yeah, it's Terminator 2, but like more polygonal.
It's Michael.
It's
such
Michael basic CGI.
Prey.
It's like the first CGI stuff they ever invented, and they just like,
that's our alien.
Oh, but guys, it looks.
This CGI has fallen out of like copyright, and we can just use it for free. It's part of the commons now.
You're making it sound like this isn't going to be an excellent movie. So, John Bradley, who's Samwise Gamgee, but Make It Game of Thrones. So he's Samwell Tarly from Game of Thrones. Discovers that the moon is out of orbit, and he's the only person who noticed, which is
the kind of thing that only one person knows. Nobody's going to notice,
and no one will believe him. So he goes to disgraced astronaut Patrick Wilson, which I think I'm in the minority on this, but I love Patrick Wilson. I think he's the Chris Pratt we all need in the world.
Yeah, the non
like problematic Chris Pratt
religion one.
Yeah.
So what did he do? Why is he disgraced? Did he like?
I don't know, because this is a trailer.
Did he like park the space shuttle drunk or something?
This is a trailer, so we don't. I think he's the one who graffitied the space shuttle that we see in a later scene in the trailer. But I love it's such like budget movie Die Hard where he's like, you gotta call NASA, and he's like, I don't think NASA's taking my calls anymore, like it's so dumb and it's so bad. And they team up with Halle Berry, who
get a burner, bro. You just dial the NASA number, everybody knows it's like 911, but I don't know,
like how great is Halle Berry. I've loved Halle Berry and everything I've seen her in forever, but her I wouldn't even call it a renaissance, but like her in John Wick 3 and her in this, I'm super into it.
It's great. She's one of the only actors that has accepted a Razzie.
Really?
I didn't know that. That's cool.
What did she get a Razzie for?
Catwoman, I'm guessing.
Yeah, Catwoman. Oh, yeah. And she just was like, yeah, it was garbage, and totally accepted it.
Lean into it.
Loved every moment. Yeah.
And I mean, Roland Emmerich gave us Independence Day, which is still one of my favorite bad movies, and it almost seems like he's playing a lot of the same chords, but he's letting Hal Berry be Will Smith, and he's letting John Bradley be Jeff Goldblum, and like they seem to steal a shuttle. They apparently shuttles can go to the moon now. That was never a thing. Sure. Shuttles were always low Earth orbit vehicles, but they seem to have like another little vehicle inside the cargo pod.
They can also be apparently underwater for a brief period of time during launch, and that's fine.
You couldn't launch a shuttle if it was getting hit with a wave. That's insane.
No,
they'll cancel a shuttle launch if the breeze is too high.
They boosted it up, guys. That's how it got to the moon.
More power.
It surfed, bro.
More power,
just got
baby.
Hit on that wave. It surfed straight up to the moon.
And the thing I love about this trailer the most is the restraint with which they held out on playing so every modern trailer has to have a slow version of a classic song, either done on like the piano or done in like a melancholic way. And they held out for almost half the length of the trailer before unleashing their version of Bad Moon Rising on us.
Yeah.
And
this was already a repressed memory, and it's coming back now.
It was
I blocked that out.
It was so good.
What?
Yeah. I'm so excited to see this movie. I don't care if it's garbage. I'm so excited. I mean, Roland Emmerich makes good disaster movies.
I mean, Independence Day
I need
was
to
good.
be able to really loud. I'm gonna get 3 seats so I can just like really
3 seats and 3 of those CBD drinks, 1 for each seat.
Yeah,
I think is what you're gonna need.
No, I think I might have to exercise my state rights and go one up beyond CBD for this movie.
I'm not being ironic or silly at all when I say I'm legitimately really excited to see this movie. As dumb as it looks, I cannot wait.
Wait, he didn't do Independence Day. He did Independence Day Resurgence.
Who did Independence Day?
I don't know, somebody else.
Actually, you're very.
Oh no, never mind. He did Independence Day. Just
he did.
Hollywood Stock Exchange doesn't have that one on here.
You're very convincing, Ryan. I'm coming around because one of my favorite movies of all time is Point Break, which is absolutely stupid.
Right? I mean, I think...
But works for me on many levels.
I think Catherine Bigelow makes smarter movies than Roland Emmerich, but I think Roland Emmerich actually hides smart ideas in dumb movies. So, like, I read this thing about Independence Day, and actually, and the thing I read actually included some quotes from Roland Emmerich, and I believe he's German, right, Joe?
Yeah.
Obviously, the name is, but I think he is also like a German citizen.
He is. Yeah.
And Independence Day, a lot of people talk about it as being like a pro-America movie, but if you think about it, it's actually about taking the July 4th holiday away from the U.S. and making it a worldwide holiday. So it's actually about diminishing the U.S. as a single entity and the role of unification of all the Earth's nations to defeat a common threat. Therefore, and the president even says it, like the July 4th will no longer be a U.S. holiday. It'll be a worldwide holiday because it'll be the day we celebrate our Independence Day. So it's actually Roland Emmerich kind of like undercutting the U.S.'s role in dominating world politics. So I
totally got all of that from the trailer.
But I mean,
it is a very well nuanced critical theory.
I joked about
postmodern exposition of capitalistic hegemony.
Did both of you see Don't Look Up?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
I thought it was a little superficial compared to this.
Well, maybe this one won't be.
Promise, honestly.
Yeah, I think this could be the intellectual take on Don't Look Up that we've all been waiting for. Because clearly nobody believes Samwise Gamgee Tarly that the moon is collapsing or whatever. So like there's clearly a climate change parable in this film. I think that's obvious.
Yeah.
And I, for one, am here for it.
If they hadn't hidden the moon in a secret lab,
I don't see a bad moon rising. I think a good moon
in Nevada.
I just love the line at the beginning of the trailer where he yells, "The moon is out of orbit."
Yeah.
Free bagels.
It sounds like somebody that's not like accepting their McDonald's order or something like.
I also love that the tagline for the movie is "Take your shot," like because it's a moonshot. It's so good. Come on, people. What are we doing? What are we doing here? This is delightful.
Apparently, you're buying some shares. That's what you're doing.
Well, Joe, tell him you be the Patrick right now and tell him what that's all about.
Well, we had an account on Hollywood Stock Exchange. I assume we still do, but who knows if anybody remembers.
If Patrick still listens to the show,
the
he
login
probably
information.
updates it, but who knows?
Yeah, Patrick, you're listening.
We're probably a whale now. We probably invested in something and just let it ride for 10 years.
I believe the film was Rubber, the movie about the tire that kills people that we all thought was going to be a hit.
I did okay over the years by just ignoring it for 5 or 6 years. My investment in Captain America did quite well. But yeah, so we if we think the trailer, if we like the movie based on the trailer, we buy shares in the movie on the Hollywood Stock Exchange. And I guess in this case, Patrick, you gotta go buy some shares.
Well, hang on. You and Charlie are allowed to voice
we get
your
to vote.
opinions. I will say that the trailer on YouTube has been watched over 17 million times. So somebody's interested. And only 6 or so of those have been me.
Million.
I set up a script on Automator to just play the trailer over and over again.
You're just writing computer code, listening to this trailer in the background.
So Joe, would you like to proffer your opinion or feeling on this trailer? Did you know I was going to love this? Did you know that that's why I was suggesting
100%. This movie screams Ryan Haupt. As far as me, my problem is I'm looking at the Hollywood Stock Exchange.
Divorce
ticker.
yourself from that.
I've already seen the ticker.
It doesn't matter. How did the trailer?
I know what it's doing.
Feel, Joseph.
I mean, it looks dumb.
Hey, past whatever. What do they say about Wall Street?
Past performance is
not indicative of future results. Yeah. Don't be a chump.
Yeah. To the moon.
Yeah,
it's going to the moon.
So you're going thumbs down based on the trailer, Joe.
I would go thumbs down. Yeah.
Charlie, are you thumbs up or thumbs down?
Oh, I like making foolish bets. I'm a tragic romantic. I'm going to go thumbs up. I'm looking at the actual monetary results of this movie. The budget was $150 million, and so far its gross revenue is $10 million. So it's at about a 8% ROI, or a negative 92% ROI, I should say.
We're still in the middle of a global pandemic.
Yeah.
It must be said.
I mean, I just think a bunch of people are going to buy a bunch of VHS, Betamax, and HD DVDs of this movie. All right.
I'm going to buy 1,000 shares.
I obviously go thumbs up. 2 thumbs up if I'm allowed to.
All right.
I'm personally getting it on Laserdisc.
The trade is in. I've bought 1,000 shares of Moonfall.
I think we used to have a group on the Hollywood Stock Exchange too. I don't know if that's still there or not.
I don't think it doesn't really work anymore.
All right. That's fine.
Yeah.
So the world's ending, and not just according to John Bradley, aka Samwise Gamgee Tarly. It's because the climate's changing, because we're releasing a bunch of carbon dioxide, not just from opening beers. And we're going to talk about some of the earliest people to figure that out in our next segment. Coming up next. For this next segment, we wanted to talk a little bit about not just climate change as we understand it today, but sort of the origins of how we came to understand the role that carbon dioxide plays in the temperature of our atmosphere. This is based off of a article from a website called The Conversation, which is a website that invites academics, scholars, to write articles for the public that are worked on with journalists and journalistic editors, so it helps the scientists sort of do in writing what we try to do on the show in a little bit more formal manner. If we're being totally honest, our show is pretty silly and conversational, but it basically helps scientists write articles that are a little easier for the public to consume, thereby getting the message out about the work that they're doing more clearly and to a wider audience, which is really cool. Frequent guest of the show and friend of ours, Sora Kim, has an article on sharks that hunted near Antarctica millions of years ago, recorded Earth's climate history in their teeth on The Conversation. And I've heard from her that it's got a ton of traffic relative to, her actual published research. So it seems to be a really effective platform for helping scientists get the word out about cool stuff they've been working on. And this article in particular talks about a woman named Eunice Foote, who is the first person to really figure out that carbon dioxide and the atmosphere have a relationship that involves temperature. So this was in 1856. She conducted a very simple experiment. She put 2 thermometers in glass cylinders, put carbon dioxide in one glass cylinder, left the other one just as atmospheric air, put them out in the sun, and noticed observationally, because this is how science starts. You just make an observation, you take some measurements, you get some data. And she noticed that the cylinder with the carbon dioxide got hotter than the one that just had air. And that led her to the realization that, quote, if the air had mixed with it a higher proportion of carbon dioxide than at present, an increased temperature, end quote, would result. So she got the connection immediately between our atmosphere and the level of carbon dioxide and the temperature of our atmosphere. Now this observation and experimental result was later confirmed and followed up on and increased in its sort of depth of understanding by men. We can talk about those if we want, but I thought it was really cool to give Eunice Foote her due as the first person to really make this connection. And, obviously since 1856, we've pumped a ton of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. So how much into the nitty-gritty do we want to get into, like, how carbon dioxide works as, we hear the term greenhouse gas, but I don't know that people necessarily, I'm sure we talked about it on the show before, but in the spirit of always assuming someone's episode is the first, is there like a quick and dirty way we can talk about Keeling curves and how we know that carbon dioxide helps trap heat in the atmosphere?
I'll be your novice for that discussion, because I'm not sure I've ever heard a detailed reason for why it does it.
So my understanding, and Charlie can butt in and tell me if I'm wrong, if I get it wrong, is carbon dioxide, like we were kind of talking about, infrared light is good at hitting water molecules and warming them up, which is why, or microwave radiation is good at hitting water molecules and warming them up, which is why your microwave is effective at heating food. So molecules have like types of radiation that they are good at letting pass through and not so good at letting pass through. Carbon dioxide is really good at being clear, passing through with visible light and ultraviolet radiation, which are the types of light that our sun in particular throws off a lot of. So if we have carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, the sunlight coming down to Earth passes through that layer of carbon dioxide on its way to Earth relatively easily. It's a window in that sense. And then that sunlight hits Earth, and Earth absorbs it, and when Earth emits that radiation back out, it's emitting it as infrared because it has the mass of Earth has sort of slowed down the wavelength and turned it from visible and ultraviolet radiation to infrared. So it's literally, if you think about like heating up, a cast iron on your stove, it starts throwing off heat, right? So it's taking the heat from the stove burner and throwing it off as heat from the other side. When that heat coming off of Earth as infrared goes back up to the carbon dioxide layer of the atmosphere, it gets bounced back because carbon dioxide is really good at capturing that infrared radiation. And so it essentially takes a radiation that could pass through carbon dioxide relatively undisturbed. Earth turns it into a type of radiation that that carbon dioxide, methane, water, other greenhouse gases trap. And so we create basically our own little greenhouse internal oven where the radiation and the energy we're getting from the sun can't escape our atmosphere back out into space to keep the Earth at a cooler temperature.
Gotcha. Makes sense.
That was beautiful. Yeah. Think of photons as kids jumping, and think of different atoms and molecules as a trampoline. And certain kids, they can bounce really high off a trampoline. And if they're jumping on a memory foam, they're not going to bounce as high. And if they're jumping on a gravel pit or a sand pit, they won't really jump at all. And so depending on what the kid is jumping on, it'll bounce right off or be absorbed. And that's what happens with photons of light as they hit different materials.
And one of the really interesting things I think about the history of our understanding of how carbon dioxide can affect the atmosphere is obviously we also knew that plants need carbon dioxide to survive, and they absorb carbon dioxide and produce oxygen. And so the thought when people were first discovering this connection was that, if we're burning more coal, if we're burning more fossil fuels, and literally, if you think about it, coal is just plants, it's photosynthetic organisms that got trapped under the Earth's crust. So that's a carbon sequestration. And we're basically just taking sunlight that the Earth
It's just received. Roots and moss and sticks.
Right. But we're taking sunlight the Earth received millions and millions of years ago that was concentrated under the Earth's surface, and we're re-releasing it back in the atmosphere. So that's the process that's happening as we burn these fossil fuels, is we're releasing energy from the sun back into the atmosphere at an even higher rate.
Insanely higher rate.
But in the late 1800s and early 1900s, there was a thought that this actually might not be a bad thing because, the humans were living at a time where growing food was still really hard to do. We didn't have industrial fertilizers. We didn't have industrial farms. And obviously, having industrial fertilizers and industrial farms comes with a lot of other issues that ought to be dealt with in appropriate ways to, ensure human health and food supply and all this other stuff. But there was the thought of like, if Earth's a little warmer, great, we can grow more food. We can actually feed everybody, And I think that's a little bit longer. Yeah. I think that's actually a really interesting, like sort of philanthropic take on the idea of climate change. But even by the 1950s, scientists realized that this was going to get bad. And there was apparently a meeting where scientists in 1965 warned U.S. President Lyndon Johnson about the growing climate risk. And the conclusion of that warning was, quote, "Man is unwittingly conducting a vast geophysical experiment. Within a few generations, he is burning the fossil fuels that slowly accumulated in the earth over the past 500 million years." The scientists who were warning Lyndon Johnson said that this could cause high temperatures, melting ice caps, rising sea levels, and acidification of ocean waters. 1965.
No, and it's incredible, and it takes a little bit of nuance and abstract thinking to realize that, yes, there's something that might be good for something, but it will cause a lot of other things that are bad for that particular something. I mean, I'm just trying to think of an analogy off the top of my head. Water is great for me. It allows me to, carry out the chemistry of my life. I don't get dehydrated and die.
But you can drown.
But I can drown.
Right? Like that's...
Yeah.
And what's crazy to me is like 1965, we were just talking about like food production. That's before the Green Revolution. That's really before we figured out how to, force inject nitrogen into the soil to create the plant growth that we experience today that allows us to have enough food to feed the world, but not the logistical sophistication to actually do it, which is, again, a whole other very sad issue. But so like the scientists who started ringing the alarm about climate change were doing it even before we had solved the problem that climate change might have helped in terms of food production, which I think is fascinating to me. And the other thing that I think is coming to light more and more is the fossil fuel companies also knew. They absolutely knew.
Years ago, yeah.
They knew by the 60s. They definitely knew like the full extent of how bad it could get by the 70s. There's been paperwork that's come out to show that like their internal data absolutely showed that they knew that climate change, because of what they were doing in burning and promoting fossil fuels.
They're so evil. Like the more I learn, just like pure capitalistic, like focus on the dollar and nothing else. They knew about dinosaurs. They knew about meteorite impacts, like crater impacts. They knew about climate change. They knew about all this stuff. By digging around in the ground, they could study so much and learn so much. Share it. And they didn't share it because it didn't
affect the bottom line.
Yeah, a monetary difference to their annual budget.
Yeah, the best analogy is what
a waste of a life and intelligence and everything else.
I know.
Man.
The best analogy is what the tobacco companies, we were talking about tobacco earlier, what the tobacco companies did with regards to the dangers of smoking. Like they knew decades before the public had a strong understanding of the science, just because these corporations, they have money to study everything internally, but they have no obligation to release that information to the public. And the public, science is funded through organizations like the NSF, and it's slower, it's messier. It gets brought to the public eventually, but not as quickly as these corporations are able to figure it out internally. And so they knew, and they made active choices to hide the potential risk, promote the continued use. They literally chose profits over the planet, and it's disgusting. It's despicable. I think it's going to go down in history as one of the if there's a history to be recorded at the end of all this, I think it's going to go down as one of the true travesties of late stage American capitalism. So,
I mean, it still happens like now.
Yeah, I mean, we're not out of the woods.
There's a push right now with like Instagram influencers to push using natural gas for cooking to keep the natural gas industry alive.
Yeah, I know, man. I have such conflicted feelings on like we have a gas stove here at the house, and I love cooking on a gas stove. I like cooking on induction fine. I know that I'll lose the fight eventually and have to go to induction. I'll never, unless things go very wrong for me, hopefully I don't get stuck with an electric stovetop.
Well, electric coils are garbage, but induction stovetops are
Induction's cool. We should do it.
They're faster.
We
than
need
gas.
to find a really good one, because I definitely want to switch to induction too. I'm like Ryan. I do greatly prefer cooking on gas to electric resistance, and I don't know what to do with the induction stove. the pricing's all over the place.
Pricing's all over the place. You need to make sure your pans are all compatible, which is an issue for a lot of folks. I know people who like, if you're a college student, you're not going to have a pan. You're not going to have a copper core pan that can handle an induction stove top.
So we need to get an induction expert on the show and help us all out.
The science of induction isn't that complicated, but like the implications and the infrastructural demands are. Yeah,
no, this is definitely a science sort of episode.
Yeah,
like,
no, that's a really good
what
point.
Stove cooks rad, looks cool, and
doesn't leak natural gas into your house,
and doesn't break when your internet goes down.
Well, so what I have, Charlie, is just I have a single induction cooktop that's just like plug into the wall.
Same, and I bring it when I go skiing because then I can make ramen and cocoa in the back of my car and not burn gas.
There you go. A buddy of mine.
I'm that Bellingham. Where
a buddy of mine, the guy I went cross country skiing with the other week. He's rigged up a situation where he can plug his slow cooker, his crock pot, into his car cigarette adapter, cigarette lighter adapter, so that he can have just like chili, just chilling in the footwell of his passenger seat.
I'm a kindred spirit.
Brilliant. Question for you both. So I have so many conflicting feelings about this. Our house has 2 gas fireplaces. I think because our house was built in the 1920s, that those gas fireplaces are both in what is a legitimate chimney structure, right?
Almost certainly.
I can see the chimney top.
Yeah. Inserts, yeah.
So I'm considering converting them back to wood burning fireplaces. Am I a climate hero or a climate monster? Like I'm getting rid of a natural gas.
I don't think it's better.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm conflicted on that too. Like I have a pile of wood in my backyard for my wood burning fireplace because I love a wood burning fire.
Right.
I mean, you're still just ejecting carbon into the atmosphere.
We love a campfire. That's a thing about white people.
I know exactly what you should do, but it's much more expensive and it is going to be a labor of love. It's not nearly as convenient as gas. And this is exactly what I did. I don't have a fireplace, so I didn't require an insert. But I have a wood-burning stove. Wood-burning stoves are way more efficient.
You a pellet?
No, I can't stand that because I'm a white male too. The wood-burning fireplace is very inefficient because it's fueled by air in your house. Yep. And so it's pulling air from throughout your house, which creates a vacuum in your house. And so then it pulls cold air from outside.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Whereas a stove, you can route the air intake to the outside. So it's pulling cold outside air in to fuel the combustion process. And so you're not cooling your house. So that's step number 1. Step number 2, the most important thing is to burn dry wood. That's way more efficient because then you're not boiling water. You're not dealing with the latent heat of vaporization of the water. Step number 3,
high specific heat capacity of water.
Yeah, definitely. And so step number 3 is get a stove, and this is where the price comes in. You have to spend an extra couple grand for the stove, is get one with a catalytic ceramic combustor. And so it combusts all the volatile organic compounds that the soot. It burns the soot and completes the combustion from wood to CO2 and water. And so when my stove is up to temperature, which only takes about 20 minutes with dry wood, I can look outside and all I see is heat waves coming out of my chimney. And my stove is rated at once at 800 degrees Fahrenheit temperature, it's rated at 0.8 grams of soot per hour, which is far less than a cigarette. But I need to maintain my wood. I have to process it. I have to make sure it's dry. And I spent a lot of money on this dumb thing.
Yeah, the nice thing about living in the desert is that the wood is always dry.
Yeah.
and I think that there's actually like a little dryer. It looks like a dryer vent on the back of my chimney. So I think that my house actually has an air intake for the
that's
fireplace.
exactly what it is. Yeah. Scoop the ash out of that and let it flow in.
Yeah, well, I can't find the inside. Efficient. I can't find the inside piece of it. I think it's like
usually just a piece of metal. It might be rusted or hard to dig out.
And I live in a row home, so
drill some holes.
My chimney is up against the other house, so there's no gap, behind the chimney.
You'll just make their house cold. That's fine. That's capitalism.
Well, so I don't know that we'll ever. If I end up getting like a cabin up in the mountains, wood burning stove all the way. Julie and I stayed in a cabin in West Virginia. I've been talking about West Virginia a lot, but I guess I've been there a lot more.
It's almost
lately.
heaven.
And we stayed in a cabin in Seneca State Forest that had no electricity and no running water. So it had a fireplace, it had a wood burning, not just like a stove, but like a cooktop. Like you were using it as your stovetop.
Yeah.
And oven. It had a...
I love it when it has like pipes running through it that also you can...
No, it had like different little compartments.
Make a shower.
It didn't have that, but it had like little different compartments that you could like move stuff around because it was closer or further from the fire. We had a water pump outside. We had an actual outhouse. The stones lining the path walkway to the outhouse had fossils in them, so that was good for me. And my car was having battery issues, so we also didn't like have a battery powered car. So it was fully rustic. Oh, gas lamps, which was really cool. We got there after dark. Never lit a gas lamp in my life.
Where you have to kind of like tilt the wick to go up.
It took me so long to figure out how to actually get the lights on, which was super fun, right? Obviously, it was great.
Yeah.
I don't know that we'll ever get a wood burning stove in the house here in DC, just because that's not really a very DC thing. But there is a book that if I ever did retro convert our fireplaces back to wood burning, it's called Norwegian Wood Chopping, Stacking, and Drying Wood the Scandinavian Way, and it's all about how to like store and manage your wood piles so that the wood is dry and efficient for wood burning purposes.
My dad is totally geeking out on that book right now.
And if you
He keeps on talking to me about it.
If you're going to buy that book, buy it from our bookshop.org affiliate link. Bookshop.org/shop/science sort of is where to get that book, so that we get a little kickback.
Bookshop.org/shop/science
sort of.
I'm doing it.
You got a mechanical keyboard there, Chuck?
Yeah.
All the cool kids
clickety
have.
clackities.
Yeah, I like the blue.
And I did
cherry.
buy myself a vintage style axe as one of my pandemic purchases. So I'm ready to chop some wood. I got a Hultsbruk, which is again not an ad, but it is a hand forged axe from Sweden. They've been in operation since 1697, and I love it.
I bought an axe to chop some of my wood down to kindling, and I bought like a really highly rated little hatchet, Fisker's hatchet. Let me tell you, the almond wood that I use laughed at that hatchet, and no joke, just dulled the blade.
I think I got a Hultsbruk with a dual-sided sharpening stone with a finger grip to keep your fingers safe while you sharpen your axe.
Yeah, just get one of those pucks and some olive oil.
Mm-hmm. Actually, I just ordered some boiled linseed oil.
Yeah, that's it's much more hydrophobic.
Very unclear.
What is this show? What
it's
are we
still
doing?
science. We're still talking about science.
Boiled
I just used
linseed
the word
oil
hydrophobic.
for my axe handle. And I
and
don't even mean the
we talked
guitar.
about wood burning efficiency and the
think I got
variables that go into it.
I got the Kisa
catalytic burners
from Hultsbruk.
It's all science. Everything's science, sort of.
Anyways,
if people got feedback.
Yeah, if you don't like us talking about random crap, write us a letter.
I think they actually like this more. We need to riff.
I enjoy
just
it.
Riff. And
we riff.
We also need to honor the people that are still listening. Is that the transition we're looking for?
Yeah, and we honor them by dedicating the final segment of our show to you, the listener, whoever you might be. Oh,
Weary and travel worn.
May the wind ever be at your back, and may be the PaleoPOW always be at your front, because that's our final segment, the PaleoPOW. Pows, the final segment of the show, where feedback from the listeners, we eat it up with a spoon. It's not an amuse-bouche. Well, I guess it is an amuse-bouche. It's not an amuse-bouche in the classical culinary sense, so that's like a small thing that you cleanse your palate with, but it's an amuse-bouche that it's amusing to us and our mouths.
It amuses.
Joe, go first.
Oh, gosh. Okay, let me open it.
Do the form submission, contact science sort of, thanks.
Okay. For my PaleoPOW, I have an email from Teemu, or not an email, a form from our website submission. You can contact us on our website.
What's that website, Joe?
ScienceSortOf.com. You can go on there, fill out the contact form. It'll send us an email. So Teemu sent us an email through that form. Subject, thanks. And Teemu writes.
Let's get another read on that. Thanks, Joe. That was a little stilted.
Okay.
Right, Charlie? I'm not crazy, right? Joe didn't sound super sincere with that. Thanks.
Look, thanks, Teemu. All right. Gosh, we'll read your email. No. So Teemu wrote us. His subject was thanks. His message is, just wanted to say that I like your show. I found you guys through the Weekly Wienersmith in November of 2021, I think. Time is a blur. Anywho, in about 4 months, I have listened to most of your 340 episodes.
Gonna butt in because we love a timeline. We love to know the frequency with which our content is consumed by you, the listener. Thank you for including that.
And let me tell you something. November 2021 to now February of 2022. No, actually, this email was sent on January 11th of 2022. So in 2 months, they jammed through 340 episodes. That's a lot of content. Teemu, we admire your dedication. Anyway, Teemu continues, I'm saving the science sort of theater ones until such a time that I can watch those movies along with you.
Good call.
Your show...
It's just a good call.
It is a good call, yeah. I've been doing the same for the Tenet episode. I have not yet.
That's not a watch along. That's just
it's not a watch along, but I haven't watched Tenet yet, so I want to hold the... I'm holding that episode.
Jesse gets real mad.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, about the way Elizabeth Debicki's character is handled in that movie. So, like, if you want some scathing...
I need to listen to this.
Yeah, if you want some scathing take on Elizabeth Debicki, yeah.
All right, that's something to look forward to. Anyway, continuing. Your show has made my life better as I drive around in circles in southwest of Finland. That is to say, I'm a bus driver and I listen to your podcast at work.
That's awesome.
That's such a charmed life. I want to do that.
I know, right?
Yeah, that sounds great.
When I first was reading this, I was like, "Is he a rallycross driver?" Like, because I know like that's big, that's huge in Finland, right? But then it was like, he's a bus driver. I was like, well, he's probably really good at rallycross if he ever wanted to do it.
Even more serious.
Maybe he's also a world rallycross driver.
He could, yeah.
They're now World Rallycross, now all electric. Very dope. This is their first season, all electric cars.
That's cool.
I'm going to tune in. Anyway, should you be accepting suggestions, I was wondering what a geologist or a biologist would have to say about the island in the game Witness. To me, it seems improbable, but I'm not an expert. I'm asking because I picked up the game after one of you guys praised it on the show. Cannot recall who or when, but still. I'm aware video games are not real. I challenge that. Video games are life. But a discussion by scientists might be interesting. But to reiterate, thank you for the show. You have made the world a better place. I hope the best for you all. Thanks, Teemu. P.S. Ryan, you seemed worried about the lack of episodes lately. Don't worry, mate. You are doing good work. Cast your pods as you can. And all the best for the new human.
That legitimately means a lot to me. Thank you very much. It's that is something I've thought about a lot since your initial email came in, and thank you for saying so. And a lot of people out there have made similar comments, and a lot of the feedback I got sort of during our unintended hiatus was basically nobody was frustrated that the show wasn't coming out. They were concerned that we were all doing okay, and I really appreciated that and felt a lot of good feels at a time when I needed that. So thank you.
Yeah, it was very nice. So thank you for the very nice email, Teemu.
Witness,
yeah. I have not played Witness. You sent me the trailer. Therefore, looks like a neat game, a little puzzle game.
What did it give you vibes of? Give me your vibe check.
Monument Valley. It gave me Monument Valley.
Interesting. Keep going with that. Keep talking to me.
Wandering around, solving puzzles in order to get from place to place.
It's another game that
in a very artistically styled
older game
environment.
Maybe one that required 5 CD-ROMs to play.
Myst? Are you going for Myst?
I was going for Myst. To me, Witness. So I played Myst, or I played Witness a bit. I've not finished it. because it's a puzzle game, and whenever I have enough time to sit around and play video games, I also have enough time to have like a beer in the day, and it makes me unable to solve puzzles. So I tended to get stalled out on Witness. But Witness, to me, it felt like a spiritual successor to Myst, Riven, all those games that I absolutely loved growing up. I'm a huge Myst Riven fan, read all the novels, haven't played all the games because, again, games are hard. I literally only beat Riven like a couple of years ago for the first time.
Wow. I've never actually played any of those. I've never played Myst or Riven. I will say, though, as you were talking, it also gives me vibes of a game I did play, which was Lego Builder's Journey.
Interesting.
Which I just played recently.
I think you can get Myst on your VR headset now.
Oh, gosh.
Which would be really fun, because I think it would be very immersive to play that game that way. Where are you at with those games, Charlie?
I haven't played any of those games. I'm a father, and I don't have much time to, progress through games in that way. I definitely can't do first-person shooters or anything like that.
Are your girls at a stage where you could like play a game with them?
Yeah, so they love Animal Crossing and Mario Kart and the Zelda Breath of the Wild and things like that.
So they may be still just like a little too young for a puzzle game like Myst.
Yeah, and so when I have time, I'm looking for good fiction and really good stories. And so I've really enjoyed Red Dead Redemption 2.
Oh, best game ever made.
Witcher 3 and God of War.
You and I talk about Witcher 3 all the time. So there are times,
and I can take those at my own pace, and sometimes I just like to just walk around.
Sandbox helps. And there are times where like I'll fire up Witcher 3 just to play some Gwent and not progress on any of the other missions, but just know that like it's a card game that I've gotten decently good at, and I can play against an AI that's not frustrating and have some fun and maybe win a new card.
I've spent a large amount of time just playing Texas Hold'em in Red Dead Redemption in a random trading station.
Yeah, but these games definitely have me intrigued. I played Myst when I was a little kid, or I guess not too little, but when I was maybe in middle school or high school, and it'd be interesting to see it again in VR. I don't have any of that equipment, but I expect to.
Joe can drive up from Lancaster,
yeah,
or fly up or glide up or whatever transportation he wants to use.
Yeah,
Myst to me is a formative game for me, and it's also like it's a sort of game where I think it could have remade the entire gaming landscape because it was that popular. I mean, it was huge. It was a huge hit, and for whatever reason, it just didn't. Games like Doom and Duke Nukem and Half-Life kind of that first-person shooter space, I think, kind of flooded the zone a little bit, and more contemplative games like
it's like the salty potato chip effect, like
In terms of whether or not Witness the island, so Witness is like you just end up on this island, and there's all these like statues on the island, but the statues are like kind of eerily real in a way that suggests, and I haven't finished the game, but it suggests that like people were frozen in place as statues by some event that happened, and you find like recordings of the world that existed on this island before you arrived, and you have to solve puzzles, and the puzzles can be anything from like weird versions of Tetris that you have to like minigame, or arranging reflectors to reflect the sun in specific patterns to open doors and stuff like that. So there's a multitude of different puzzles that you have to solve in each sort of section of the island. I hadn't thought really anything. I mean, and the island has different biomes, so it's a small island, but it's got like a desert portion, a forest portion, a winter portion, kind of an island from Lost effect. So I don't really have much to say on like the science of the island other than it's a complete hodgepodge, but I also didn't finish the game, so I don't know like if that's part of the story and to what extent I just haven't uncovered all the secrets of the island yet. But it's a game after receiving this email, it's like something I'm gonna revisit. In saying that I only beat Riven, the sequel to Myst, which every bit of marketing said Riven, the sequel to Myst. So it's like I have to say the full phrase, otherwise it doesn't count. I never beat Myst 3, so if I need a puzzle game itch scratched, and I have to be careful, because if I start playing a game, I can get obsessed very quickly, and I still haven't finished my Witcher 3 first playthrough, and I also have a tendency of, like, if I abandon one game I can only play one game at a time. So, like, if I abandon If I abandon Witcher 3 to go back to Myst 3 or Witness, then like my Witcher progress will be completely stalled out. So I'm still into Witcher enough. I've got the hair now. I started reading the books. So I'll probably stick with Geralt of Rivia and toss a coin to my Witcher and keep going with that. But you definitely put Witness back on my radar as a game to check out because it was really cool when I did.
And no guilt or shame, Teemu, about video games. They're not. They are real life. They're a way to appreciate life, a way to dive deeper, reflect, and enjoy stories.
It's a legitimate art form.
Enjoy different perspectives and art. So I mean,
Red Dead Redemption 2 is you get to go to a time before we ruined the planet. It's great.
Yeah. There's many ways to waste a life, and video games are a life well wasted.
Yeah, and I remember having a discussion about that with friends, some of my more outdoor-focused friends being like, well, why'd you play video games when we can go for a hike? I was like, because a hike doesn't tell you a story. It can. Like, if you know the geology of that area, if you know the natural history of that area, you can totally get a story from a hike, but like, a video game tells you a story in a way that no other medium can, and it's really interesting. And in my top 5 video games of all time is a game that Joe sent me as a gift, Firewatch, which is like set in 1980s Wyoming, and you're a guy from Boulder who needs to escape his life for a little bit, so he goes to be a firewatcher in Wyoming, and it's as beautiful as Pixar's Up in terms of the relationship story that it tells about people and the way we deal with trauma and the way we
absolutely. I love that game, and you should go for hikes. You should go for hikes once a month, but the activation energy required to go for a hike versus playing a video game, you should be able to play a video game once or twice a week.
Hike in a video game and get something different from that.
Yeah.
And it's cool.
And it may enhance your next hike, which is great.
Yeah, because maybe you needed to see that the sort of artistic interpretation of Shoshone National Forest in the 1980s, and then get really disappointed that studio got bought up and didn't produce the second follow-up game that looked really good. That was set in Egypt, and I wanted to play it.
Capitalism again.
Makes fools of us all. But you know what doesn't make fools of us all? It actually does. That's a terrible transition. Is life and evolution. And a couple of months back, we had Carl Zimmer and Eric Kirschenbaum on 2 subsequent episodes talking about what is life and what isn't life, which was Carl Zimmer's book, Life's Edge. And then sort of if we were to find alien life in the galaxy, how might it reflect the animal sort of shapes and sizes and sounds that we look and see on Earth, which is Art Kirschenbaum's book, A Zoologist's Guide to the Galaxy. And a challenge I threw out there was asking folks to submit their weirdest examples of life on Earth, and the winner would get a copy of Carl's book from us. We would send it to them, and we have a winner. I'm ready to announce a winner. Are you ready to receive the winner, everybody?
I am.
Absolutely.
Elizabeth D. from Hawaii, the island of Hawaii, wrote in to say that she thinks the weirdest life forms are zooplankton sea salps, S-A-L-P-S, salps. First off, they look weird. Next, they are in the Chordata phylum, which is the same phylum of life we're in. So they're closely related to us in a very broad sense. And they make chains to swim more effectively, but only sometimes. They are also sequential hermaphrodites in that they start life as female. They're protogenous or protogynous, which means female first. So they all begin life as female and then switch to male and never back. So they look like a jellyfish.
These things are weird. Yeah, these things are weird.
But they're a tunicate in the group Tunicata, which means that they're an invertebrate, but they're in the lineage of animals that becomes the vertebrates, the chordates, which are us. So I think that's an excellent submission.
Yeah, they look like jellyfish, but they are more closely related to humans than jellyfish.
I mean,
which is bonkers.
Yeah, and we are more closely related to like a starfish or a sea star than we are a jellyfish.
But at least like a sea star doesn't look like a jellyfish. This is just a little jelly blob.
Yeah. But also, like, I've seen videos of like the chains that they form, where like this is undulating strand of organisms moving throughout the ocean in unison. And I mean, it's, it's like a strumming guitar string. Like, it's incredibly beautiful and hypnotic almost, but like it's also eerie. And the fact that I'd seen those, but I don't think I realized that they were something that we actually shared, obviously we share DNA with all life on the planet, but I didn't know that they were that close to us.
So what's the difference between, invertebrate, vertebrate, and chordata, non-chordata?
Good
question.
Or
am I talking about two different like ways of looking at
Not
the
really.
tree of life?
Not really. No, that's actually a really good question, Charlie. And essentially, vertebrate is like this structure that we have that is our backbone and our
spinal cord
running through the backbone. So that's a little bit more advanced than the chordata, which is essentially anything that has a notochord, which is a stiffening rod of cartilage or bone that also contains some nerve cells. That is a more basal. So I've said this before on the show, but just to reiterate, in biology we try to say basal and derived as opposed to primitive and advanced because it's less loaded. So basal just means closer to the node where the two branches branched off from one another. So a notochord is a flexible rod. It can be made of cartilage. It does contain, and it also has like the platform for a nerve cord if needed. And so it's just a little bit more basal structure that seems to be the ancestral trait from which a true vertebral column later derived.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
No, I this blew my mind when I read that email. I started going all over the internet, like reached the end and then was still amazed.
And then so we are chordates, we're chordata, and we have some members of the chordata group that are not true vertebrates. They're, I think lampreys are another example of a fish, that is not a vertebrate, but is still in our chordate family tree. And then echinoderms, which is the group of animals that includes sea stars, sea urchins, sea
those five deals.
The pentaradial symmetrical organisms, although like sea cucumbers aren't really pentaradial. Sea urchins, brittle stars, all those organisms. Echinoderm literally means spiny skinned. So the things with spikes. They are nested with chordates in a group called deuterostomes, which means second hole, because in embryonic development, the anus forms first, and then all other invertebrates, so like insects, mollusks, crustaceans, arachnids, bivalves, brachiopod, all the other invertebrates are protostomes, where their first hole, the mouth, forms first in embryonic development. So the two major groupings aren't necessarily vertebrate and invertebrate from a pure taxonomic sense. They're butthole first, mouthhole first.
That definitely makes a lot of sense. I see why humans are in the butthole first.
Yeah, we've produced a fair number of them. I've
learned a lot.
So great submission, Elizabeth. Thank you for submitting that, and I will be in touch with you hopefully before this episode even comes out to get your mailing address to send you a book. So thank you for that. Charlie, we hand out theses. Speaking of being deuterostomes.
Yep. No, we certainly do, and they are deserving and require patronage.
Yeah, so we are on Patreon at patreon.com/sciencesortof if you would like to support the show with a small monthly contribution, or we have it set up now that you can contribute one sum yearly for a 15% discount on your total purchase, if that's an avenue folks would like to pursue. We just had somebody sign up for that, so we're super excited to see that somebody had taken advantage of that, and that was great. If you don't want to chip in a little change in the change jar monthly, we are still available to be donated to on PayPal, so you can go to our website, sciencesortof.com, and click the PayPal link, and for a one-time donation, donate that way. And bookshop.org is an affiliate partner for us, so if you read books, which why not, you can click our bookshop.org link, buy books through our shop, and unlike Jeffy Bezos's river-based platform, this will support local bookstores in your area, which is really cool and something we want to support. So go check that out at scienceorder.com. Charlie, take it away.
Normally, we are a merit-based platform, and we try to avoid nepotism. But in this particular case,
don't know that's ever been true.
We just pretend.
Yeah,
you have to put up a facade.
I'm gonna throw. If I had a sort of stamp, I would stamp that statement with sort of.
Sort of. No, I'm a fan of nepotism personally. I like people. I like people that like me. But anyways, this individual, this father figure of sorts, he has donated to Patreon twice, and so he was able to rise to the top of our awareness. And it is the medical doctor, Bruce Haupt, which shares the same last name as Ryan. We have not performed the DNA test, but I can confirm that they look similar.
Yeah. I've been confused for him many times on the phone and in person, and you've met the man, Charlie. You've met him.
Yeah, they're both handsome devils that are well-spoken with high IQs, and we need to dedicate a thesis to Bruce Haupt.
Yeah, so my parents contributed to Patreon as a couple, and so we gave them a joint thesis title back in the day, but my dad signed up separately, and I thank him for that. Thank you, Dad. And
in front of every mediocre man is a fantastic woman.
And he wouldn't be the first person to appear on this show who had multiple degrees, so I thought it was fair that we awarded multiple thesis titles, right? I mean, you didn't do a master's, Charlie?
No.
Okay, so you went straight. So, but like I have a thesis and a dissertation, so I got like 2 titles that I can toss around. So it's not unreasonable for a person to have 2 titles. So
I am a reverend.
You're a reverend. A thing folks may not know, but my dad, but he went to the Air Force Academy and served in the Air Force. So I think the fact that we talked about a lot of space stuff, maybe there's like an Air Force angle. His original, before he was a medical doctor, he was an aeronautical engineer. Not an aerospace engineer, but aeronautical engineer. So maybe there's something we can do there. So what are you thinking, Joe? Great start.
Yep. So
what about
James Webb
Space
Telescope, global warming.
A carbon dioxide powered rocket using our own greenhouse emissions to fuel our escape.
No, we can't escape.
Okay, well,
we have a perfectly good planet here.
Do we?
Yes, we did.
Okay.
Gotta stick around and fix it. It's a
lot easier I like the.
It's easier to fix this one.
I like the idea of like launching carbon dioxide out into space.
So, wait a minute. So the salps, the sea salps.
Ooh, okay.
Apparently are very effective at pooping carbon.
We don't want that. We want things that eat carbon and poop out something else, which is what trees do.
They poop out carbon and it falls to the bottom of the ocean, where it gets sequestered at the bottom of the ocean, which is good.
So we're firing rockets at the bottom of the ocean.
Well, no. What if we?
My dad's also a skilled scuba diver, so firing rockets into the ocean for carbon sequestration purposes, I think we might be onto something.
Yeah, I was thinking we could just like launch the carbon.
Usually, I don't know anything about the people
sun,
that we're giving theses to. It's weird for me to have all this insider info.
Right. Yeah, what if we're combating climate change with sea salps somehow? And how do we tie a telescope into that?
We don't have to. We can do whatever we want.
I mean, we can.
Sure. What about like linking? What if he links a bunch of rockets together to fire them into the ocean to sequester
rocket chains? Yeah.
What if the thesis is like, if we turned Hubble around, I could monitor these rocket chains as they fired off into the ocean? The Hubble's probably too close to Earth to even resolve anything.
Almost certainly, yeah. You probably couldn't focus Hubble on Earth. If you could, good spy satellite.
Good spy satellite. What are you talking about, Joe?
It's probably a terrible spy satellite. Like you said, it's focused.
Is there any such thing as a good spy satellite?
It depends what side you're on. If it's your spy satellite, sure. It's their spy satellite. Not so much.
I got an idea.
Okay.
Oh.
I came up with the theme, so the
you did. You nailed
the thesis is on you.
Well, it's collaborative. It's collaborative.
I know.
Okay. I did the thing I often do where I just like come up with a word and I'm just like, how can I make that word into an acronym that can then be part of a thesis title?
Sure.
So try this on for size. SCRUB. Scuba carbon removal underwater bioremediation using sea salps to sequester carbon at the bottom of the ocean.
Just hit enter. I need to see it.
This is what always happens: is I say it before I finish typing it, and then you want to see it in the Slack.
Yeah, I need to see it written out because it gets so long. It's like, wait, what?
All right, take a look.
Screw. I like that. So I like right off the bat
that the first letter of the acronym is a different acronym.
Is an acronym? Yeah, a buried acronym is very aerospace.
Nested. I'll call it a nested acronym.
Yeah, nested acronym is very aerospace engineering. So I like that. And honestly, like if we could get another one in there, like if you made carbon CO2.
What if we call it like salp scrub and we come up with a pre
acronym?
Yeah.
I think that's good enough. I like the nested acronym though.
Okay.
You don't need more acronym on the front side. But like acronyms of acronyms are fun. SCUBA carbon removal underwater bioremediation. I mean, I like that.
As it currently exists, it doesn't really involve the act of humans scuba diving.
It doesn't. You're right. We could also
How's
focus
that? I added a little tag on the end of it, Joe.
You could also focus it on specifically, climate change.
I don't know. I think with the tag I added, I think we're in a good spot. What do you think, Charlie?
Yeah, it's pretty good. The only thing I came up with was light the afterburners, far light, trapped heat, and transchordata.
I feel like when Joe and I work on a thesis, like Joe and I are very back and forth and we're bouncing ideas and we're constantly communicating. And when we ask Charlie to participate, it's like Charlie goes into a corner and comes back with something and like hasn't been participating in the discussion at all, which is not a criticism. It's just, I think that's like the nature of Charlie's collaborations in the early stages when it's, pie in the sky stuff. But pie in the sky would have been a good acronym too, but we can.
I feel like we've used that before.
Probably have. So Bruce, Dad, I think your thesis, this might be a working title. Maybe you can update it for publication. Is SCRUB, Scuba Carbon Removal Underwater Bioremediation using sea salps to sequester carbon in oceanic basins. I used using twice. Oh no, this is a disaster.
Oh no. Via human propelled.
I was going to say facilitated by, or do we like via better?
Via. It's okay. To go with Latin when in doubt.
Using sea salps to sequester carbon in oceanic basins via human propelled delivery mechanisms. Thank you, Dad, for being a patron twice over. Very much appreciated. And I'll see you this weekend.
Congrats on the double major.
I'll see you before this episode comes out, but it's fine. I think that's all we got. The end.
The end.
You guys got any plugs?
No plugs.
I feel like other podcast people have plugs because they're not just amateurs pretending to do a podcast.
Yeah. No plugs, no ads.
I know. We got some good stuff coming down the pike. Been getting some good books from publishers. They've been asking us to talk about them. I'm excited about it. Joe and I's recent episode with the dudes from Nat Geo, making waves. People are excited about it. People are talking about it. I thought it was a really good episode. So thank you, Joe, for joining me on that. So check out our previous episode. I've been doing a lot with iFanboy these days. So if you are into comics, if you are into comic book movies, if you are into comic book animation, check out iFanboy. I'm often popping up on those episodes to spout about comic books.
You know what? I do have something I'll plug on the topic of bookshop.org. A while back, we had Christina Gaddy on the show to talk about Chessie, the Chesapeake Bay sea monster, or Chesapeake Bay monster.
That's great.
She was writing a book at the time, Flowers in the Gutter. It came out sometime after our episode released. I actually just read it. I got it from bookshop.org. It was really good. It's worth checking out.
Gave it to my sister for Christmas, and I bought it through bookshop.org.
Nice. 2 copies.
Yeah, I'm being totally sincere. I did.
Nice. A good book. Worth reading. You can get it on bookshop.org. You can find it on our bookshop.org page under people who have been on the show. Books by people who have been on the show, I think.
Yep, we have a list. We have a list for books by us, which currently only includes Soonish. Folks who've been on the show, which includes folks we've had on the show, and books we've talked about, which include things like the Expanse series and Snow Crash, and then yeah. All right, well, that will do it for this episode of the show. We went long as predicted because of I'm going to blame Trailer Trash Talk, even though I think we were just long on every single segment.
Yeah. You can blame me.
I won't. I refuse to. I won't allow it. God will not allow it. Is that from Patton?
Understood.
It's the line from Patton, right?
I think so, yeah, indeed.
Talks about going to war, if he goes to war without it. If the country goes to war without him, God will not allow it. Anyway.
I just want to plug our own show, Science Sort of. This has been an absolute pleasure, and I want to be on more often.
So we'll see Charlie in 6 months. We'll see Joe next week. We love you all. Thank you for listening. Facebook.com/ScienceSortOf, Twitter.com/ScienceSortOf, ScienceSortOf.com. You can find all our links. Bookshop.org/ it's so hard to say. Bookshop.org/shop/ScienceSortOf to buy some books. Read something, tell us about it. You might be featured on a future installment of the PaleoPOW. I found my rhythm, Joe. I'm back in the outro because I can now confidently say that if you come back next time, you're going to get a whole lot more science.
Sort of.
Visit sciencesortof.com for show notes, links to all the stories we talked about, and ways to interact with the hosts, guests, and other listeners. Science Sort of is brought to you by the Brachiolobe Media Network of podcasts, with audio engineering by Tim Dobbs of the Encyclopedia Brunch podcast. That's all for this week. See you next time on Science Sort of.
Last month, my car tire had a nail in it, but there was like a foot of snow, so I knew I could drive it on the snow and it wouldn't get hurt.
There you go.
And it wasn't all the way flat, so I packed my cross-country skis and drove to the garage and then skied home and then skied back to get my car.
I don't own cross-country skis, but I'm going to buy some this season. That's my commitment to me. I went cross-country skiing the other weekend.
I have some good recommendations, some real easy ones that can have an edge so you can actually carve downhill.
I mean, I will take your recommendations and I will appreciate them. I'm a
total novice. If you know what you're doing, then take your own recommendation.
Well, I've been doing downhill at a pretty advanced level since I was like 8. So when I started cross-country skiing, there was a slight learning curve just with the open-heeled binding. But I picked up on it pretty quickly and feel very comfortable and confident on skis, even with Clementine attached to me and pulling me around on the snow. So
cool.
Nice. I rode some skis the other weekend that did have a little bit of an edge, and they were a little wider than even a typical backcountry ski, and I loved them. And I literally offered to purchase, like when I was turning back into my rentals, I was like, "Can I just buy these right now?" And they were like, "No," because they sell a lot of their stock at the end of the season, but they weren't ready to sell these yet.
That's exactly what I did. I had some Rossi off-track skis that I rented. I was like, "These are awesome. Can I have these?" And they're like, "Yeah." And they sold me for like at 50%. So.
Right, which I'll try to do at the end of the season. But I did 9 miles with a buddy of mine who's also named Brian over in Canaan Valley, and it was like perfect blue skies, great snow, like -20 with the wind chill. It was that week where West Virginia was colder than most of Alaska. Oh, it was awesome. So much fun. Let's do a podcast.
Okay.
First ever standing up Science Sort of. Might have to sit at some point, but we'll see.
I was gonna say the standing desk might help you keep a tight show. You'll be like, I'm getting tired. We gotta wrap this up.
Never a tight show when there's trailer trash talk on the line.